Yo, what is going on, guys? Cash and Clean here. So for today's video, I just want to talk about something pretty important. So we got farming classes, damage classes, and I guess you can consider tanky classes, but we don't technically have those, if that makes sense. You either get one shot or they just don't do enough damage to you. Which, that whole thing can be a video on its own, but that's not what I want to talk about for this video. For this video, I just want to get into which class I think would be good for you guys if you're just starting out and you're trying to get your way all the way up to 30k power rank so you can access D14 for those crystal gems. So I've mentioned this in other videos, I've mentioned this on my stream, but you have to go for a farming class. You don't have to technically, but I just recommend going for a farming class. And the reason being for that is because when you have a speed farmer, you can do things obviously a little bit more faster. So if we take Shadowhunter, for example, dungeons through walls, as long as you do a decent amount of damage with him, you can just slowly build him, get him all the way up to 30k, and then the moment you're able to solo D14, then that's when you can start farming other gems, other gear, anything you need for your other classes. Now this method would apply if you farm with, like, I don't say Boomeranger for example, but it's gonna be a little bit slower compared to like Shadowhunter, so that's why I highly recommend farming class. And for a lot of my videos I always mention Shadowhunter, Boomeranger, mainly because they're good. At the time you're recording this, they're just meta, and I get that sometimes some people just might not want to play that's fine. There's other farming classes out there. There's Ninja, he doesn't do too much damage, but you can farm with him. There's Bard, there's Knights, Vanguard, Fate Trickster. I mean, some classes obviously aren't as good as other ones, especially in terms of damage, but those are your options depending on the class that you want to farm with. I'm just going to stick to Shadowhunter and Boomeranger, mainly because they're just good at the game, and that's just what I prefer to play. I personally find them pretty fun. So Shadowhunter, get him up to 30k powering so he meets the requirements for D14, and you can just replace that with a different class if you play somebody else. And I know that there's a light requirement as well, but I do have a ton of videos going over light and how to get more. A lot of it will be from your gems, but if you're stuck, just feel free to check out that video in order to access D14. I'm going to be saying that a lot. And the moment you guys can solo it or just get close to soloing, or even if you start getting like magic damage gems for example on a physical damage character, then you can start putting stuff on other characters. And I'm only telling you guys this mainly because I always see a lot of people farming with classes that aren't super fast or efficient, and on top of that I also see people that are building classes very early on. Like if you're 20k 15k power rank, I mean you can, but it's not going to be that good. Maybe if you get extra empower gems, like a 3-star empower gem, sure, you can put that on other classes if you get extras, but when you're playing Trove, you have to think of the long term. So say you're farming, maybe you get some extra shadow gems, maybe some radiant gems. Those are okay, they give some power rank. You know that you're going to replace them, so what's the point? The amount of damage that you're going to get from putting those gems on is going to be very little, and it's not going to help you that much. So that's why I'm going to say pick one class, at least try to pick one class, and then later on after your speed class, your farming class, you can go for a damage class, and that damage class can be anything like Boomeranger, Solarion, Oromancer, Ice Sage, Draco. It doesn't really matter too much as long as you have a damage dealing class. I mean, Shadowhunter still works for this because he's a pretty good all-around character, and other classes could work too, because currently with our max light we can pretty much solo just about anything in D14. Sometimes it takes a little bit longer than other classes. D15 is a bit of a struggle, but maybe in the future it'll get better once we get more light, more coefficient and stuff like that. So I'm just going to use myself as an example for this, but if I were to start brand new, I would go with Shadowhunter and Boomeranger. And you can check out my previous series where I started on a fresh account and got my Shadowhunter and Boomeranger up. Pretty much I was just playing both classes, and with those two classes, obviously they're physical damage characters. So what I would do in my instance is I would get gems for a magic damage set in case I wanted to play Ice Age or something. Because sometimes enemies might be physical immune, so I need a backup option. So with Shadowhunter, Boomeranger, I would pick up an Ice Age, and then maybe I can go for maybe a magic damage farming class like Dino Tamer for example. But that's just in my instance. In your case it might be a little bit different in case you want to use other classes. But the main point of this video is just pick one farming class and try to build them to the best of your ability. If you happen to get extra gems, and I do mean like good gems, you can put those on other characters. If you get a backup Crystal 4 for example, you can just throw that on a random character. But you want to start small, and then the moment you start building up your main character, you can go to your damage character and then just slowly kind of branch off from there. I know we have 18 classes, that's pretty intimidating, there's a lot to do, but if you take things one at a time, I promise you it'll be very easy. You don't even need a second class, honestly. You can just stick with Shadowhunter and just go with him all the way through. Just use them for farming and damage, but it's nice to have a backup option. So that's why D14, that's where you get the most valuable gems, the crystal ones, and by the time you're 30k power rank, you'll be able to get guaranteed crystal 4s from the gear crafter vaults. So anything extra, those can go onto other classes, assuming you have the profession done. And then from there, it's going to be getting crystal gem converters with your qubits or credits and using them on your good empowered gems, not on a 2-star. and not on a flower power, but on a good one. Preferably starting with the cosmic ones because those give lights. And as for the lesser ones, once we make it to D14, you can see if you can get at least 2 boosts into lights or one with 3. That would be really lucky if you do, but that would be huge as you're casually farming. You'll need a ton of gem boxes, but that's the thing when you hit 30k power rank. When you're getting from 30k to 40k, pretty much everything is going to come down to your gems. Upgrading all of your stellars to crystal, and then maximizing the levels. And then from there, you're pretty much done with the game. You just need dragons, primordials, and finish augmenting your gems. But yeah, that's like the main takeaway for this video. If you have anything extra you want to add on to whatever I said, please drop it down in the comments down below because it could help out one of you guys that are watching. But on that note, thank you all so much for listening, watching, viewing, and subscribing, and I'll talk to you guys later.